So our current project looks like so. There's quite a bit of static content here. The pledged amount, and I guess I'm the product. I just realized I used my avatar. Ignore that, but the project amount is not dynamic. This part is, I think. No, none of this is. I don't remember. But the backers is not dynamic and the days to go is not dynamic. So we need to add some columns in the database to support something like that. So let's add a migration to go ahead and do such. So I'll make a new window here. I'll make it a little bigger for y'all, and I'll create a migration. So shorthand is G, so generate, and then I'll just say add fields just to make it generic because it's going to be a handful of things. I just want to add all at once, and the one is going to be a current donation amount. So we'll increment this as more subscriptions are added to the code, or added to the project, I should say. And then we need an expires at timestamp. We'll just do date time, and we're gonna modify these a bit after this migration is created, and then a status, which will be a string. So that's it. We'll run that and go open that. Cool. So nothing in there, but it does add the fields, so that's good. So we need to add a column, projects, and then we'll say the current donation amount. Kind of curious why it didn't add. Let's do this again. I forgot to put 2 in that, and that's the, I think, signifier. So I'm going to move that to trash. We didn't migrate it yet, so it's not a big deal. Press the up arrow, and I'll just say 2 projects, and I think that's what tells Rails, hey, this is going to the column that will, or the table that will be projects. So hopefully, yeah, there we go. Now I've got a starting point. Okay, so we want a default of 0 here. And then the project, the expires at one is kind of tricky, but it's some fun Ruby will do. That's, I want it to expire. You could make this more dynamic than I'm doing, but you could make another column that's like expiration time and let the user set, which is probably wise. But I'm doing it as a default for all projects right now is the default, since it's a date time type, will actually say date time dot now plus 30 dot days, and that'll just say, okay, in 30 days this will change status, which is what it's going to change, this status in the database. So the default, we're going to make each project active by default, and that's how that's going to work. So after 30 days we're going to run a background job essentially to change this to inactive, and then once it's inactive we'll show a different state on the UI saying that the project is inactive and you can't fund it anymore. So with that in mind, we have these fields ready to roll and we can migrate. So I'll say Rails DB migrate. Cool, so there we go. Expires at Saturday. It's like a weird ass timestamp there, but that works. And then the default is active. So we'll go and run that migration and we should be all set. So what I want to do though is when a new project is created, we'll delete this one, it won't matter in a minute. Actually, I'll just go ahead and delete it. When we create a new project, we want to set that timing off and want to kind of have a countdown clock. And the way that's going to work is through a background job, which will run in our Sidekick queue. So you need a queuing app to get this running. If you don't have Sidekick installed, I'm basically using it in my template already. We'll need to have that to get going. You can find it here or go Google for it and install that gem. And then in my routes file, I have, I showed you before, this block that's requiring the web UI, and then the user in mention needs to be an admin. So I'll need to set an admin property in a minute. But what I want to do is create a background job that expires the project for us. And you could do this with either a background job like I'm going to do, or maybe like a cron job, which some people prefer. It's more of an operation. You could probably control as opposed to a background job. So let's generate a job, and I don't know that I've used jobs much on these tutorials. I did on my course, but what I'll walk you through is you can generate one like anything else. So we'll say generate job, and we'll call it expire project, and the class is going to append job to it. So we'll just say Rails generate job project. There'll be a jobs folder in your app directory, and we'll have this expired job class that's called, and you can queue as default. One thing I should have mentioned though is the application file is using Sidekick by default. Make sure you set that up if you're using Sidekick or whatever else you want to use. That's necessary for this to work in our case. So what we'll do is do this perform method, and it's going to do something later. So it's going to add it to a queue. So think of it as a assembly line or something of things to do for the app to run when it gets the chance to. So what I'll do is add the initial logic to the app to get this going. So I'm going to set an instant variable that's going to be the project, and we're actually just going to pass the project through, and we'll do that within the controller layer. So that'll be coming up. Now we could just say return if project already active. Actually, I'll just make that one method, and we can add a private method below, and we'll just say def project already active. Oh, it should be inactive, excuse me. So if it's already inactive, I don't want to run this. So our background job will be like, nope, I'm not going to change anything. So we'll just say project. All it's doing is checking the status. You want to make sure you spell this right for sure. Okay, so if it isn't inactive, we'll say project inactive. And just save it. Cool. So that's essentially all it's going to do. The trick is we want to do this another time. We don't want to do it immediately. So you can actually do it, asynchronously, which is great. But what about the user who created the project? They may probably want to know about it, and we can actually notify them with an email. So let's do that. We can just say user, I'm going to create a new emailer that's going to have this concept. So we'll say, let's do that first. Rails generate mailer user. It'll be a user class. Within it, we'll do stuff, and we'll call this one expired notice. Wow, I can't type. There. Project expired notice for a user class. That's going to be a mailer class. So what I'll end up doing is adding what looks like this. So we'll say user mailer with project. You can pass in a name parameter here. Dot project expired. We'll call this method on that class. Notice deliver later, or now if you want. We'll do now because we probably want to test this out. I'll just do later actually. And then we'll generate that file. It generated, when you create the mailer, it creates a user mailer class, which is this default stuff here. It creates some views for the email itself, a text view and an HTML view. Plain text is, you can use it if you want. If you don't want it, you can delete that. HTML, same thing. And then in our tests file, we get previews and then mailers tests. So we have a mailer test here, and then the preview mailer itself. So we could say the same thing we kind of did here. Instead, this won't work out of the box, but it's a close go. So we'll just say, instead of an instance variable, we'll just do project first or last or whatever you want to do. Just as some dummy content. And we need to still create a project because I deleted the last one. But let's first get that mailer going. So I'll go back to the mailers, user mailer. Here's our basic setup. Project expired notice will actually have a parameter that gets passed through. If you recall, in the job, we're passing through the project to this method. So we can accept it as a parameter. So we can say a project equals params project. And then we could just say mail, which is another method. Say a project dot user dot email. So the person who created the project gets this. So subject cool. Now I realize a lot of this doesn't really pertain to a marketplace app. You're probably looking for that meat and potatoes of that. That's fine. That's coming up. I just wanted to build an app that's kind of realistic. So if this doesn't interest you, let me know, I guess. Should I just focus on the real stuff or kind of build the real world stuff? Because I found not much of it exists out there and it's annoying to me. So people just do chunks of stuff and it doesn't make a ton of sense when you're trying to learn the ropes. So here's, I'm just doing this as we talk. I'm just going to say we wanted to inform in an email. You want to use URL helpers instead of paths because you need the absolute URL. It's one thing I always bites me because I always forget about it, but it's a useful thing. There we go. Okay, that's all I wanted to do essentially, and we could just do the same in the text if you want and just get rid of the HTML. That should be our email. We could go check this out in our mailers test. So Rails mailers, we've got that one there thanks to that generator. Notice we don't have, that might be a Rails error. I don't know. Let me reboot my server real quick. I actually need to make a project, to be honest. So let's do that real quick. Just a dummy one. Then we can, let's I need to update this to go create a project. I'll do it with the URL. I need to add a button to the thingamajig header. Idea 1 2000 test. There's our project. Cool. If we go into our console though, I just want to show you about an example. Rails. Sorry, it's a small. Bump that up. So if we do project.last, we should see an expiration. Those columns we added, we've got the donation goal and created at, and then expires at set, which is cool. Status is active, which is right. So all those things are already set by default, which is great. I just wanted to show that by example. But now I think if we go to our mailers, we can probably see this. Maybe I'm thinking wrong though. Let's go to our mailers, user mailer. That's odd, it should totally work. Project expired notice. Get rid of these. Preview with project first. Project expired notice. Oh, this deliver later isn't something we need. There we go. There we go. We wanted to inform you that this project ID1 has met its expiration no longer active. So that was the one we just created. Obviously it hasn't expired yet, but that's just showing by example. And we can go to that and there it is. Cool. So now we can queue that job up by essentially going to our controller and calling it. So on our controllers will go into our projects controller. When a new one's created is where we're going to do it. So if the saved project saved, I'll actually perform it then. So we could say expire project job.set, and here we can do something fancy and wait until, and then we'll say project.expires at, and then we can perform. So that essentially says fire this up, run this, wait till this expires at time happens, and based on the current date, I guess, and then perform later. So that will throw it in the queue once that's ready to rock and roll. We can run this, and I'll just do perform now to show by example. The same for the mailer in that class. These are easier ways to test this. So I could probably say, let's see, bundle. Here's a command you need to run. So bundle exec sidekick. This is on the sidekick wiki, by the way, if you need to find it. Default queue is mailers. So these are different queues you can run, and we're going to run the default one and the mailers one. And that'll kick off sidekick. And you'll notice this red wrapper stuff that's in there. But what we can do is go into our user account. I'm going to go one more tab and Rails console. We'll find the last user. So okay, user.last is going to be me, because that's the only account I have. I'm just going to say user.admin is true. Cool. So I can just say you again. It should say true on the admin front. That just gives us the routing and capability of going to localhost sidekick. Then we should see processes here. There's going to be stuff going on, but here's that one that's set up to go in 4 weeks time, and there's the idea or ID. But yeah, it should be added to the queue in that time frame. So that'll eventually kick off and just run the method to change the state of these things. So what we can do then is check it with the console. We could just say Rails once more. Project.last will give us the last project. Cool. It's set to act. What I'll do, actually, this isn't going to work for me. So I'm going to say mail catcher. If you don't have this installed, it is another gem, once I can spell it, catch, that runs a local host to your app. I have it already installed. We need to configure our app to do this though. So let's add that. Go to the mail catcher gem, this one here. Here you just run gem install. It's like it's a global install, so a global gem. Inside our development environment, we want to copy these and pass them in. So development, and you can put this anywhere. It's just a way to intercept your emails locally, so you can send them and legit try them. So what I'll do is go back to our projects controller, and I'm going to just get rid of this set part and comment it out for now. Now when we create a new project, we should be able to get an email that runs at least and set off the expiration of the project. So again, I need to, let me add that real quick into our layouts application. I'm going to add the new route path up at the top because it's annoying me. So we'll just say where the basic link is, new project, and new project path. All right, now I can go click that, and then here's my title. Let's say I don't know, it just creates that. let's see if our stuff in queued. Sidekick. Yeah, that was sent. I think I needed to restart the server though for it to work. So let me try once more, because it should have come through mail catcher at that point. Let's try one more time. There we go. We get the email. Cool. So we know that the mailer's working. We know the job is running. That's a good sign. So basically we can depend on that date that we set in our project controller to do the magic we need. So now instead of perform now, we'll just do later and let Sidekick take care of all of our queuing up. So instead of deliver now, we'll do deliver later too. So that's essentially it. And then if we check that last job or last project, project.last, notice it says inactive, which is exactly what our job wanted to do and what it was supposed to do. So that worked. Pretty cool. So that's all to say. We want to render a different view if a project's active or inactive. So what I'll do is, to save some time, I'm going to go and make a few methods in our project that are just essentially saying we can call attention to active or inactive pretty easily. So we can scope it too. So we could just say scope active. And this is going to be nice for rendering the active feed of projects rather than inactive ones. So you probably don't want to see inactive ones on the index. So here's how we can do that. And maybe admins can see inactive or something. So that's how you add those two scopes. And the thing with scopes is they should be chainable. So you can always chain these. So think of that when you're creating them. And then we'll say def active. We'll just basically say if it's this. And the same for inactive. That'll give us some handy helpers in our views to determine as such. Sweet. So now in our views, we can kind of render a if or else project. So what I'll do is create two different partials that are going to do the work. So I'll say active project and then inactive project. And our active project will be basically what we have in our show, with a few exceptions. And then inactive will be a little bit different. And honestly, I'm going to copy this from my other project to save a little bit of time. It's very similar. We're just not quite there yet. So I'll save that. One thing I want to add though in the active project is now we have those attributes in our fields. So this stuff like days to go and stuff is dynamic. Now we can add that. So we'll say distance. Rails has a nice little helper for this. So distance of time in words to now. It's a long one, but it makes sense. So we'll say project dot expires at right on. And then let's see, backers is still going to be static for now until we get to subscriptions. But here we'll say project, we'll say number to currency of project current donation amount there, and then that's the goal, so we'll keep that one. So that's essentially it. I want to remove this because we're going to add the tiers coming up, which are what I'm calling perks for backing the project, much like Kickstarter. And I'll indent this a bit. I think that should do it. What I did notice though is in our show view, of course, we still have the what would be the active project. So we actually need to do if project active, that method we just created, render that, else render the other. So we'll say render and then we could pass in project as a local variable like so, and then this one will be inactive. Then the only other thing to do is update our partials to not use the instance variable anymore. So now let's do a find. This one's already set up. You notice I copied it, but we just want project to be the word project without that @ sign. So in this case, I'm going to get rid of all of these. I'm hitting Command D a bunch of times in VS Code until it stops, and then just type project instead. If any luck, we should get this to work. Now I'm hoping backings count. That should be, that'll come later. We'll come back to that. So that's what an inactive project looks like. This is the one we expired immediately, which is great. So pretty cool stuff. Comments are closed for this. There's still all that stuff going on, but this one's expired. This one's active, but we spelled stuff wrong. So let me change that. Current donation amount. There we go. Active, inactive. Okay, cool. But there's no like inclination of what's what in the index view. So why don't we like use those scopes I added to make it work the way we want? And a simple thing to do is with that scope, we go in the controller, and instead of all, we could just say active. And if you want to chain like order on that, you could. So now there should just be one, because those past two have been expired, but they're buried. So up to you. If we want to bring that back, if we just do inactive, it should just show the two that are expired. So that's how scopes work. Pretty sweet. Awesome. Okay, so next up, let's start talking about payment setup for Stripe and Stripe Connect. I'll do that in the next video. Hello Rails is my new course on Ruby on Rails. I'll teach you Ruby on Rails from the ground up. Visit hellorails.io for more information.